Today is August 26th, and welcome to this edition of Arbitrage News Weekend. I'm your host, Daniel Hopwood, and today we will be talking about market winners and losers, animal to human transplants, top 3 stories of the week, the Writer Guilds Association strike continues, commercial real estate, and the bus driver strike. Today, let's start with winners and losers of the week. NVIDIA soared 6.6% in after hours and trading on Wednesday and was expected to gain 8% after the bell. Data center sales surged to a record of $10.32 billion, topping the $7.98 billion consensus estimate, while Q3 sales were forecast at around $16 billion, well above the $12.5 billion that analysts were expecting. Wedbush Securities analyst Dan Ives said NVIDIA's guidance will be fueled, igniting a tech rally that will continue into the rest of the year. With NVIDIA futures climbing more than 1% overnight, the godfather of AI also approved a $25 billion share buyback and said it would continue to repurchase stocks this fiscal year. All of that came to an end come Thursday, when the stock, even after its impressive earnings, turned down, which as a result pulled down the NASDAQ index significantly. Our loser of the week, which normally would be an individual company, is actually the entire hedge fund sector. The SEC has voted to implement stricter regulations on private equity, hedge funds, and venture capital funds, targeting transparency in an industry that now manages over $25 trillion. New rules necessitate private funds to provide investors with standardized quarterly statement, prohibit preferred cash-out treatments that harm other investors, and demand annual audits. They also mandate disclosures or explicit consent when passing on compliance costs to investors. While advocates argue these measures ensure fairness and transparency, critics say the SEC is overreaching and may stifle competition and increase costs. Notably, lobbying has led to consensus in the final rules, including clauses on investor lawsuits and grandfathering provisions for existing arrangements.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
This week on the Arbitrage blog, we cover organ donation, animal to human organ transplants, bus strikes, and the writer strike, all of which can be found on arbitragetrade.com/posts. Now to Scott and Royce to discuss the Writer Guilds Association strike.
Hey, Scott, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, pleasure for being here.
Oh, yeah, no problem, man. I heard that there's a writer strike, and I heard about this from your wife. So strangely enough, let's talk about it.
Okay, that's fair. So you're talking about the writer strike from this last summer. So it's now become not just the writer's strike, but the writers and also the actors strike.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they broke down separately, the talks did, but now they're, in order to advertise essentially, now they're kind of made it one big strike. And
okay, so what made them actually, it's like, okay, I got beef. I want to strike. What are they upset about?
A few things. Back in 2007, 2008, the last time the writer struck, you'll notice that was also the time when all the services, all the VODs were coming out. It was all video on demand. So you
cool. Dr. Incredible, Mr.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
And then some subpar movies were a result of that, like the second Daniel Craig, James Bond, not very popular, and part of it because he had to write some of his own scenes during that movie.
So we definitely need writers.
We need writers. Writers and actors help make movies a lot better.
So they're upset right now because why?
It's a few things. A big thing is residuals. And video on demand not really understanding how they want to monetize, because before, when you had obviously you had network TV, and that had very straightforward advertising every few minutes. Then you had cable, so it was a mixed model where you had some paid, you had some advertising, but when you went to video on demand, it's almost pure advertising. I mean it's almost pure memberships.
Okay.
So they didn't realize how much money they were going to lose on the advertising side. And so they're like, well, we'll just cut costs with everybody on the back end, as far as we won't pay them residuals. We won't.
How can you not pay residuals? That's like been the backbone of acting for like since acting has been a thing.
Well, because there's no real residuals, and of course, because every time you view it, they just don't share the numbers.
I heard that AI is actually hurting this too, basically allowing this to happen because they're doing stuff. Someone told me that they're basically, it's like, hey, we can take your likeness and then fake it.
Yeah.
And then basically superimpose it on other things. And now we can use your likeness wherever we want and we don't have to pay.
Right. Remember how there's been this paranoia, like in the sci-fi community, and also to a lesser extent in the business community, of robots will replace our jobs. You know, we've heard that over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, now we're getting to the place where these studios are saying, yeah, I think the robots can replace your jobs with AI. Yeah. So obviously anybody listening is going to know that AI right now is not real AI. It's you know,
everyone's labeling it AI because it's the new buzzword, like the cloud.
Right. It's like a search engine, you know. Yeah. It's got preferences. So, but what they're doing, so for instance, like you said, with people using a likeness, is they used to take background actors and you pay them a daily rate, and they would get some of those residuals every time that episode showed up, and they were like the fourth person in line in the Seinfeld episode behind the main cast. They'd get just a little bit. And so that way you could live your whole life by being in a lot of these shows, being like a real day actor, you know, 9 to 5 kind of blue collar guy or gal.
Everywhere.
Exactly. But now they'll scan you the day you come in, and now they just own your likeness.
Oh man.
They don't have to give you anything anytime you use. You won't even get acknowledged that you're using it.
All right. Thanks, Scott. I think we're out of time. Appreciate you coming in. I'd like to hear so much more about this. Thanks again.
All right.
Uh-oh, Brad's buzzed.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he's starting with the woots. And now a speech.
I just want to say that friendship is about heart and brain. Who's with me?
Good thing is, he knows when he's buzzed.
And my brain is saying, when it's time to go home, somebody call me a ride.
Love that guy.
Me too.
Know your buzzed warning signs? Call for a ride when it's time to go home. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Welcome back, and here are 3 things you should know going into the weekend. Former President Trump turned himself into the Atlanta Fulton court jail Thursday night over allegations of his election conspiracy charges. His mugshot quickly went viral, making his first real booking photo despite facing multiple prior indictments. Many anticipate a surge in mugshot merchandise from online sellers, and Trump's campaign itself has already profited from such imagery. Although Trump has evaded mugshots in other states due to his recognizability, Fulton County insists on a standard procedure. Given Georgia's permission stance on court cameras, more visual from Trump's legal ordeal may emerge. SpaceX is also facing legal scrutiny as the Department of Justice accuses it of biased hiring practices against asylum seekers and refugees. The claims highlight SpaceX's miscommunication that only U.S. citizens and permanent residents can be hired due to sensitivity for technical constraints, citing a few tweets from Elon Musk as evidence. Despite the usual conservative hiring practices of companies affiliated with NASA or the Pentagon, the Department of Justice believes SpaceX has overstepped. And lastly, Dollar Tree, following the footsteps of other major retailers like Target and Walmart, is pointing to shrink as a result for its recent profit downturns. Shrink refers to losses from theft or damage. Dollar Tree's response involved placing more items behind protective cases, a strategy that might deter theft but also deter genuine customers. However, some question the validity of these theft cases. Walgreens, for instance, recently admitted to overstating its shrinking numbers, leading to skepticism of the real impact of organized retail crime. Those are 3 things you need to know going into this weekend, brought to you by Arbitrage Trade. We'll be back after this ad.
If you can plan barbecues and weddings, you can plan to protect yourself from a natural disaster. Sign up for local alerts, prepare an emergency kit, and make a family communications plan. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Now to Caroline and Royce to discuss animal organ transplants into humans.
Hi, Caroline. Thank you for joining us on the show today. What are we talking about today?
So today we're going to be talking about some organ transplants. And yes, recently, a Dr. Robert Montgomery from New York University's Health Center. He is the director of their Transplant Institute.
Okay.
And they have been working because there's so many people on the transplant list that can't get organs. Tremendous, especially kidneys. He's been working with kidneys. That has some of the highest numbers. He actually was able to do a transplant of a pig kidney into a human.
Aren't those usually rejected?
They usually are. And so that's been a big problem. Normally they haven't lasted even a day or two when they've tried this in the past.
Okay.
But now there is a farm in Virginia that is doing some genetic modifications on these pigs. So they were able to change some things. They were able to take out, it's called the alpha-gal biomolecule, or part of the gene.
That's a mouthful.
Right. So most people call it alpha-gal.
Okay.
And it is responsible for the rapid rejection. So this normally rejected, sometimes within a few hours, but even just a couple of days. So they were able to remove that gene.
Okay.
And so since they can't do, from the FDA, they can't do this transplant on live, like living patients.
Yeah.
And so they were able
testing, not okay.
Right. So they actually got permission from the family of a man who died of brain cancer. He didn't know he had brain cancer. So he just one day fell out and died.
Oh no.
And so he was unable to donate his organs because in the autopsy they found out he had cancer, but his family donated his body to research. So he's been on a ventilator. He's brain dead, but they're keeping his body alive.
Oh wow.
In order to do this testing. And this kidney from this lab, or from the farm in Virginia, has lasted, at the time when I did this research, it was 32 days.
Oh, wow.
Which is way longer than anything else has lasted throughout the testing. And they've given permission for his body to be used for another month. So that'll be about mid-September. We'll know if the kidney was able to work for another month.
Okay. I heard that in previous transplants, some people can't eat meat, or I heard something about.
Okay, so that's with the alpha-gal gene that they removed for the transplants. There's a certain tick bite that some people get that makes them allergic to meat, so they're not able to eat meat, and it's this alpha-gal gene. And so they're hoping that with this research that's been done for the kidney transplants, and they're looking at other organs as well, they're hoping to then
opens up a wide market of things.
Huge, right? Amazing.
Wow.
And so they're hoping that with this alpha-gal that they've been able to take out of the kidneys, they're hoping to then branch out into research to maybe do some genetically modified other animals to allow people with this tick bite to then be able to eat meat.
Hey, and all of us carnivores out there appreciate this 100%.
Right. So the one thing that I really liked about this is that it's going to help with the organ shortage that there has been, if they can keep this up. There are currently more than 103,000 people on the waiting list for a transplant, and thousands of those die without ever getting a transplant. And there are also people who just can't even get on the list who actually need one.
Oh, wow.
And so one thing—
How do you get on that list? So do you know?
To receive a transplant, it has to come through your doctor.
Okay.
But
I would hope so.
If you
market,
right,
kind of scary.
But if you want to be an organ donor now, until this animal to human transplant gets up, you can visit organdonor.gov/sign up, and you can sign up through your state or through your local driver's license location.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Caroline. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Royce.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to our financial deep dive of the week. We're diving into the current state of commercial real estate sector, guided by insights from several heavyweight financial institutions. The firm Capital Economics paints a bleak picture, especially for the office sector. With reduced demand due to remote work, Capital Economics predicts that office values may not recover to their pre-pandemic peaks until at least 2040. They note that the office key card swipes have halved, with vacancies soaring. The REIT investors are moving away from the office space. The takeaway: an uphill battle awaits for office space owners. Now, PwC offers a more optimistic stance asserting that the commercial real estate market isn't crashing. Yes, transaction volumes are down across the board, but PwC expects leasing activities to return as economic conditions stabilize. Their perspective, dealmakers might be more innovative given the challenges, but there's no outright crisis. Morgan Stanley is taking a more bearish outlook. They warn of a downturn potentially worse than the Great Financial Crisis. With over half of the $2.9 trillion in commercial mortgages due for renegotiation in the next 2 years, amid rising lending rates, they anticipate a massive price drop in commercial real estate values. Bank of America is offering a counter-narrative. Bank of America claims that the sector's challenges are manageable. They cite potential loan refinancing strategies that could shield borrowers from the current economic strain and argue that improved underwriting since the last crisis has made loans less risky. The message: there's turbulence, but no systematic risk. UBS analysts emphasize that the situation isn't as dire as headlines suggest. While acknowledging challenges, especially for the office sector, they see this issue as manageable unless a severe recession hits. And finally, Goldman Sachs zeroes in on the office sector, highlighting its vulnerabilities. They point risks to things like high rates and challenging refinancing conditions. Goldman's view: the office and retail sectors, heavily reliant on bank financing, face significant challenges ahead. In summary, the commercial real estate sector is clearly at a crossroads, and its future is mirrored in uncertainty. While the shift to remote work poses undenied challenges, especially for the office space segment, opinions vary on the overall health of the sector.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Welcome back, and for our last segment this week, we have Aria and Royce to discuss the bus drivers' strike.
Hi, Ari. Welcome back to the show. Can you tell me a little bit about the blog post that you posted this week?
Sure. So, probably one of the more interesting ones I've had is the current situation in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They've got a little bit of a situation, especially if you've got any kids that have to take public transit into school. The bus drivers all called in on Friday. Well, not all, but more than 50% of them called in on Friday, resulting in some early school closures there. I actually found out because I have a friend that lives out that way who had to go pick up his kids early.
Yeah, my cousin lives in Baton Rouge. I haven't even heard anything about this yet.
You absolutely should talk to your cousin about it because the whole situation's kind of wild. So, I mean, they're definitely underpaid. They're pretty dangerously close to the federal poverty level. If if they have a family, especially, it's just not a livable wage. So I imagine a lot of these people have more than just this job.
Are they a union, or have they unionized, or are they just like an unofficial strike? Or
it seems to be I think everybody knows it's a strike, but they're not calling it a strike. I'm not sure if they're unionized. Based on what I've seen, it doesn't appear to be that way.
Someone organized it. Maybe they should form a union.
That might help. That definitely might help. Especially since their negotiations with the school board, it did get them some extra money, but you can throw money at the problem with it's only solving half of it. Did you know that a lot of those buses aren't even air conditioned?
Yes, I'm quite familiar with that. I grew up in Louisiana. Oh, never, ever. Again, wouldn't recommend. 1 out of 10.
Yeah, so you know how hot it can get, and then being in a metal death trap that windows probably don't even really open anymore is it's probably not the best way to get to and from school.
Yeah, fried kids, never good. Never, ever good.
Yep.
I'm actually surprised. I was actually at a high school here, or middle school rather, here in Memphis yesterday, speaking, and everyone was standing outside. It was 110, not in the shade. Kids were just playing, and I'm like, why are these kids out in this heat? And apparently, hey, I guess we were built differently, or they're built differently than we are.
But I remember like when we were out there, they had at least had misters and other things out there. But yeah, it's the conditions are not very favorable.
I absolutely agree. These new kids are built different because I could not take it.
Thank you for joining us today on another edition of Arbitrage Weekend News. You can always find us on arbitragetrade.com and on all social media platforms. Enjoy your weekend.
Arbitrage Trade Analytics LLC is a privately held research company. Arbitrage Trade Analytics LLC is solely responsible for the preparation and distribution of the contents of this podcast. The opinions offered in this podcast are for informational purposes only and are not intended to function as investment advice. Seek a duly licensed professional for investment advice. For more information about the informational research and services offered by Arbitrage Trade Analytics LLC,